Power outages are bringing to light Texas's income tax-free status and its problematic climate repercussions for the working class. I'm Yoonj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. After days of record low temperatures and snowstorms, Texas has finally asked the Biden administration for federal assistance. It's odd timing, given that leaders didn't tap aid last month when Biden signed an executive order to cover the housing costs for the homeless population. This has prompted many to question the state's priorities and whether it takes the suffering of upper-class residents for officials to address crises. Over 4 million households in Texas have experienced rolling blackouts, with over 2.7 million homes without power as of this morning. The hardest hit communities include low-income and minority neighborhoods, as well as a reported 25,000 homeless individuals. Texas has had cold weather-related outages before, including a severe cold front in 2011. That's why many locals are pointing to negligent leadership backed by big oil this time around. On Fox News, Texas Governor Greg Abbott blamed frozen wind turbines for straining the fossil fuel systems, echoing a Republican talking point that's been widely disproven. A considerably larger amount of lost power was due to issues with the state's gas, coal, and nuclear energy. But given Texas's dependency on fossil fuels, leaders have been hesitant to criticize that industry. But former Congressman Beto O'Rourke took to Twitter yesterday to point out Texans are suffering without power because those in power have failed us. As with COVID, a natural disaster has become far deadlier due to the inaction and ineptitude of Abbott and Texas Republican leadership. This didn't have to happen and doesn't have to continue. The main reason Texas hasn't been able to get much of its power back is that it has an independent power grid separate from the rest of the country. The state was able to do this in 1970 because it's the country's top natural gas, oil, and wind producer. And scientist Brian William Jones pointed out that this allowed Texas's energy to be privatized and deregulated, funneling more profits into fossil fuel corporations and avoiding federal regulations. So why is this bad during a winter Armageddon? As Washington Post reporter Dino Grandoni notes,
normally if a state is experiencing some sort of problem with generating power, they can draw power from neighboring states in order to meet that need.
And Texas reporter Stephen Monticelli tweeted yet another reason why this privatization is screwing over the most vulnerable. We need an investigation into why these rolling outages haven't been rolling into rich enclaves like Highland Park and Preston Hollow, or into downtown Dallas commercial buildings, while other parts of the city have remained without power for the entire day. This has landed Texas in the crisis that's killed 23 people so far. As I mentioned earlier, the state will be receiving federal FEMA aid. This is ironic, given that Texas doesn't have an income tax, despite being home to much of the country's oil tycoons and 10% of the 400 wealthiest Americans. So Texas's leadership, by seeking federal aid and not taxing its own millionaires, is allowing the rest of the country to pay for those gaps, which is reminiscent of a welfare model. At the same time, it imposes high sales and property taxes, which further exacerbates inequality by disproportionately straining the working class. Fiscal policy expert Melissa Rogers explained to Dallas News, poor people have lower disposable income and they're spending a higher percentage on things like food and clothing and things that we would buy that have sales taxes. This link between the lack of an income tax and fossil fuels is rarely discussed, to our collective detriment. There are 9 states without an income tax in the U.S., most of which depend on fossil fuel revenues like Texas, making them dependent on the oil and gas industries even when they are clearly not sustainable. And while this storm will pass, there will be more like it as the climate crisis worsens. And Texas has demonstrated that the underprivileged will bear the brunt until we wean states off of this toxic economic relationship with the fossil fuel industry. It's essential for our Earth, and for the other 99% who are sick of sacrificing our lives so that oil tycoons can save a few dollars heating their pools. I'm Yoonj Kim, and that's what you need to know.